The fluorescent light above table 4 had been flickering for 3 weeks. Elena Ross kept meaning to fix it, but between the morning rush, the lunch crowd, and the mounting pile of bills stuffed in the drawer beneath the register, a dying light bulb seemed like the least of her problems. The envelope from First National Bank sat on the counter like a coiled snake. She'd opened it an hour ago, read the words "Final Notice" in bold red letters, and promptly shoved it under the cash drawer where she wouldn't have to look at it. $48,000. Due in 30 days. Or Ross's Diner, the place her father had built with his own hands 40 years ago, would be seized and auctioned off. Elena pressed her palms against the cool Formica counter and took a shaky breath. The lunch crowd had thinned out, leaving only the regulars scattered across the worn red vinyl booths. Old Joe reading his newspaper by the window. The construction crew from the highway project sharing a plate of fries. And him. Table 4. Same time every day. 2:30 in the afternoon. Jackson Sterling, though everyone called him Stone, sat in the corner booth like a piece of weathered granite. 6'3" of scarred knuckles and faded leather, with a salt and pepper beard that couldn't quite hide the hard line of his jaw. His leather cut, the sleeveless vest that marked him as Lost Souls MC, was so worn the patches were barely readable. The club's insignia, a flaming skull, had faded to a ghost of itself. He'd been coming here for 8 months now. Same routine. Black coffee, no sugar. Slice of apple pie if they had it, cherry if they didn't. He'd sit there for 2, sometimes 3 hours, never saying more than necessary. Coffee, please. Thanks. Keep the change. Elena grabbed the pod and walked over, grateful for the distraction from her spiraling thoughts. Warm up? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Stone glanced up from the battered paperback he was reading, some Tom Clancy thriller with a broken spine, and gave a single nod. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they had a way of looking at you that made you feel both seen and protected at the same time. She poured, noting the grease under his fingernails, the fresh scrape across his knuckles. Working man's hands. Hands that had built things, broken things, fixed things. Pie today, she asked. Apple's gone. Last slice went to Joe an hour ago. Cherry's fine. She started to turn, then hesitated. Stone was looking at her with that quiet intensity he had, the kind that missed nothing. You okay, Elena? 3 words. That was more than he'd said to her all week. She forced a smile that felt like it might crack her face in half. Long day. You know how it is. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and went back to his book. But Elena had the distinct impression he didn't believe her for a second. As she cut a slice of cherry pie in the kitchen, her hands trembled. The knife clattered against the plate. She gripped the counter's edge, fighting back the burning in her eyes. She couldn't afford to cry. Not here. Not in front of the customers. But God, she was so tired. Her father had died 2 years ago, massive heart attack, while flipping burgers on that very grill. She'd inherited the diner along with his debts, his dreams, and his stubborn refusal to let developers turn this place into another soulless Starbucks. She'd fought to keep it going, worked 16-hour days, cut every corner she could find. It hadn't been enough. The construction crew left, waving their goodbyes. Joe folded his paper and shuffled out, leaving his usual $2 tip under his coffee cup. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting everything gold and fragile. Elena delivered Stone's pie, refilled his coffee without being asked. He murmured his thanks, and she retreated behind the counter, pretending to organize menus that didn't need organizing. She didn't notice she was crying until a tear splashed onto the laminated surface of a menu, right on top of the daily specials. When she looked up, Stone was watching her. He didn't say anything, didn't ask questions. But something in his expression softened, just a fraction, like a crack in a stone wall. Elena turned away quickly, swiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. She heard the scrape of his chair, the heavy footfalls of his boots on the checkered linoleum. When she looked back, there was a $20 bill on the counter, for a $4 check, and Stone was already walking out the door, the small bell above it chiming softly in his wake. The next morning started the same way every morning started. 5 a.m., prepping the grill, brewing the first pot of coffee, unlocking the doors at 6 sharp. Elena moved through the familiar routine on autopilot, her body going through the motions while her mind churned through impossible math. 48,000. 30 days. She could sell her car, maybe get 3,000 for it. She could ask her aunt in Phoenix for a loan, though they both knew there was no way her aunt had that kind of money. She could. The door chimed. Elena glanced up from the register and felt her stomach drop. Carter Vance. Even at 7 in the morning, he looked like he'd stepped out of a menswear catalog. Tailored navy suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. Gold watch catching the fluorescent light. Hair styled with that deliberately casual perfection that took serious money to achieve. And that smile, bright white, professionally bleached, absolutely predatory. He wasn't alone. 2 men in matching suits followed him in, carrying leather briefcases. Lawyers. Had to be. Elena. Carter's voice boomed across the empty diner, all false warmth and toxic charm. Just the woman I wanted to see. She straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. We're not open for another hour, Mr. Vance. Oh, this isn't a social call. He slid into the nearest booth without invitation, gesturing for his companions to join him. They arranged themselves with the precision of a military operation, briefcases clicking open in unison. Though I'll take a coffee. Black. Your boys here will have the same. Elena's jaw tightened, but she poured 3 cups and brought them over. Years of service industry training kept her hands steady, her face neutral. Carter took a sip and grimaced. Christ, do you use motor oil for creamer? Never mind. He pushed the cup away and leaned back, all casual authority. Let's talk business. I'm a busy man. I have nothing to discuss with you. Oh, I think you do. He nodded to one of the lawyers, who produced a folder and slid it across the table. I'm prepared to make you an offer. A generous one, considering the circumstances. Elena didn't touch the folder. This diner isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, sweetheart. It's just a matter of price. Carter's smile widened. I'm offering you $40,000 for the property. That's well above market value for this establishment. Market value? Elena's voice rose despite herself. This building is worth 3 times that, and you know it. The land alone. The land is valuable. This trash heap sitting on it. He gestured around the diner with undisguised contempt. Look at this place. The floors are cracked. That ceiling tile is water damaged. Is that original Formica? Jesus, it's like a museum of poverty in here. One of the lawyers snickered. The sound made Elena's skin crawl. My father built this diner, she said quietly. Every booth, every table, with his own hands. How touching. And now he's dead, and you're drowning in debt, and I'm offering you a life raft. Carter leaned forward, and his smile turned sharp. See, I know about your little problem with First National. 48,000 due in. What is it now? 29 days? My offer solves that problem. You walk away clean. I demolish this eyesore and build something people actually want. The answer is no. Elena. Carter shook his head, mock sympathetic. You're not thinking clearly. Let me paint you a picture. In 29 days, when you can't make that payment, the bank seizes this property. They auction it off. And guess who'll be there, ready to buy it for half of what I'm offering you now. He tapped his chest with one manicured finger. You'll end up with nothing. No diner. No money. No precious memories of Daddy Dearest. Whereas if you take my offer, he pushed the folder closer. You walk away with enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere more appropriate for someone of your station. The casual cruelty in that last word, station, made Elena's vision blur red. Get out. Carter didn't move. I'm sorry. I said get out. This is my diner, and I'm asking you to leave. For a moment, something ugly flickered across Carter's perfect features. Then the smile returned, colder than before. You have 29 days to reconsider. And trust me, you will reconsider. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with elaborate care. Oh, and Elena? When you come crawling back, and you will come crawling, my offer will be 30,000. Not 40. Consider it a penalty for wasting my time. He strode toward the door, lawyers falling into step behind him. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. Enjoy your last month in this dump. The door chimed. They were gone. Elena stood frozen in the middle of her father's diner, hands shaking, heart racing. She looked around at the cracked floors, the water-damaged ceiling, the worn booths that had seated 3 generations of this neighborhood. Trash heap. Eyesore. Dump. She walked to the counter, picked up the pot of coffee, and poured herself a cup with hands that trembled only slightly. Then she reached under the register and pulled out the envelope from First National Bank. 29 days. The morning rush would start soon. She had work to do. 3 days later, Carter Vance returned. Elena spotted the Lamborghini before she spotted him. A screaming yellow Huracan that looked absurdly out of place on this working-class street, parked diagonally across two spaces like it owned the whole block. Carter emerged from the driver's side wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment, flanked by four friends who looked like they'd wandered off the set of a cologne commercial. Oh no, Elena breathed. It was the dinner rush, 6 p.m., every booth packed with regulars. The Martinez family crowded into the corner, their 3 kids coloring on paper placemats. Old Joe and his veteran buddies playing cards by the window, the night shift from the hospital grabbing a quick meal before their rounds. And Stone, as always, at table 4 with his coffee and his paperback. The door chimed, and Carter swept in like he was making an entrance at a gallery opening. "Gentlemen," he announced to his companions, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Welcome to authentic working-class dining. Note the ambience, that unique blend of grease and desperation you can't get in our usual establishments." His friends laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. Elena moved from behind the counter, professional smile locked in place. "Can I help you?" "A table for 5, Carter said, removing his sunglasses with theatrical flair. "Your finest booth, please. We're here to experience how the other half lives." It's very anthropological. She wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her being screamed to throw him out. But she needed every customer, every dollar. Even his. "Right this way." She led them to the large booth near the back, the same one the Martinez family had just vacated. Carter and his entourage slid in, their designer jeans and silk shirts a jarring contrast to the cracked red vinyl. "Now this," Carter said, running a finger along the table's edge, "is authentic Americana. You can practically smell the poverty. It's intoxicating." More laughter. Elena distributed menus with practiced efficiency. "Can I start you with drinks?" "Water," Carter said. "Just water. Tap water. We want the full experience." He turned to his companions. "Did you know people actually drink tap water? It's fascinating. Like, there's no filtration system or anything. Just straight from the pipes." "I heard it has more minerals," one of them said, suppressing a giggle. "Minerals, and probably lead. But that's part of the charm." Carter grinned up at Elena. 5 tap waters, sweetheart. And take your time. We're going to soak in the atmosphere." She brought the waters, took their orders, 5 small coffees, nothing else, and retreated to the kitchen, cheeks burning. Through the service window, she watched them settle in for what was clearly going to be a long stay. They'd pulled out their phones, taking selfies against the vintage backdrop of the diner. Carter was live streaming, panning his camera across the room while providing running commentary. "And here we have the local fauna in their natural habitat. Blue-collar workers enjoying their post-shift meal. Note the authentically worn clothing. Is that actual paint on his jeans? Incredible. You can't buy this kind of realism at Barney's." The construction workers kept their heads down, focused on their meatloaf. But Elena could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their jaws clenched. The Martinez kids had stopped coloring, sensing something was wrong even if they couldn't articulate what. An hour passed. Carter and his friends sat there, 5 half-drunk cups of cold coffee on the table, their phones out, their laughter getting louder. They'd started a game, trying to guess people's professions and salaries based on their appearance. That guy, flannel shirt, work boots, definitely under $30K a year. Probably has a truck with a gun rack. The woman with the hospital scrubs, CNA maybe? Definitely not a doctor. $40K tops. Elena felt sick. She wanted to throw them out, but that booth was taking up space she desperately needed. The dinner crowd was backing up. People were leaving because there were no tables. Then Carter's gaze landed on table 4. Stone sat in his usual spot, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. He'd finished his dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and was working through his second cup of coffee, his dog-eared thriller propped against the napkin dispenser. Elena saw something predatory flash across Carter's face. "Oh," he said, loud enough to carry across the diner. "Oh, this is perfect. Gentlemen, look at table 4. Is that a real biker? Look at that leather vest. The tattoos. The beard. It's like Sons of Anarchy, but sadder." His friends swiveled to look. Stone didn't react, didn't even glance up from his book. "Hey," Carter called out. "Hey, Grizzly Adams. Yeah, you at table 4. What chapter are you with? The accountants? The periodontists?" Snickers rippled through Carter's group. Stone turned a page. Still didn't look up. I think he's ignoring us, one of Carter's friends stage whispered. Of course he is. Probably can't afford to draw attention. I bet he's drinking that coffee as slowly as possible because it's the only meal he can afford today. Carter stood up, and Elena's heart lurched. You know what? I'm feeling charitable. It's been a good week. Let me buy that gentleman another cup of coffee. Carter, Elena started. But he was already walking towards Stone's table, his friends trailing behind with their phones raised, recording everything. Excuse me, sir, Carter said, stopping at table 4. I couldn't help but notice you've been nursing that coffee for quite a while. Must be tough, making one cup last all evening. So here's what I'm going to do. Stone finally looked up. Elena would remember that moment for the rest of her life. The way Carter's smile flickered, just for a second, when Stone's gray eyes locked onto his. There was something in that gaze, something ancient and immovable, like staring into the face of a mountain that had watched civilizations rise and fall, and remained utterly unimpressed by all of it. I'm going to buy you a refill, Carter finished, but his voice had lost some of its bravado. Call it a good deed. Man helps man, right? Even if one of those men looks like he crawled out of a highway ditch. His friends laughed, but it sounded forced now. Stone closed his book carefully, marking his page. He took a slow sip of coffee, set the cup down with deliberate precision. Then he did something that made Carter take an involuntary step back. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who'd seen real violence, dealt real pain, and found the current situation mildly amusing in the way you might find a yapping chihuahua amusing. I'm good, Stone said. His voice was gravel and whiskey, rough from years of shouting over motorcycle engines. But thanks. Are you sure? Carter pressed, trying to regain his footing. Because I'm happy to spot you. What's another $2 to a guy like me? Hell, I'll buy your whole meal. Consider it charity. He said he's good. Elena had appeared at Carter's elbow, her voice tight, with barely controlled anger. Please return to your table. Carter turned to her, and his mask slipped completely. The charm, the playful mockery, all of it dissolved, revealing something ugly and mean underneath. You know what your problem is, Elena? You don't understand basic economics. This whole neighborhood is dying. These people, he gestured around the diner. They're obsolete. The world's moving on without them, and they're too stupid or too stubborn to notice. This diner? It's a museum, and you're the last curator of a collection nobody wants. Get out, Elena whispered. Not yet. I paid for coffee. I'm entitled to sit here as long as I want. He leaned in close, and she could smell his expensive cologne. 25 days, Elena. Then this place is mine. And the first thing I'm going to do is change the name. Maybe Vance Tower. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? He turned and walked back to his booth, his friends following. They stayed for another hour, filming, laughing, turning her father's diner into their personal entertainment. Elena stood frozen, humiliated, helpless. From table 4, Stone watched everything. His hand was wrapped around his coffee cup, knuckles white, jaw tight beneath his beard. But he didn't move, didn't intervene. He just watched and waited. The brick came through the front window at 2:30 in the morning. Elena was in the apartment above the diner, the same one-bedroom where she'd grown up, where her father had raised her after her mother left, when she heard the crash. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and grabbed the baseball bat she'd started keeping next to her bed. By the time she made it downstairs, whoever had thrown it was gone. Just the brick sitting in a pile of shattered glass, a piece of paper rubber-banded around it. She unfolded the note with shaking hands. Last chance. Take the offer. No signature. It didn't need one. Elena spent the rest of the night sweeping up glass, taping cardboard over the broken window. At 6 a.m., she opened for breakfast service like nothing had happened, because what else could she do? The insurance deductible was more than she could afford, and calling the police would just create a paper trail that might spook the few remaining investors she'd been courting. She served coffee and eggs with a smile that felt painted on. 2 days later, they came during lunch rush. 4 of them, early 20s, with that particular swagger that came from never having experienced real consequences. They swaggered in wearing 2 expensive sneakers and designer hoodies, and Elena knew immediately they weren't there to eat. Table for 4, the leader said. He had a diamond stud in his ear and a smirk that made her skin crawl. She seated them, brought water, took orders they had no intention of paying for. They were loud, obnoxious, knocking over salt shakers, accidentally bumping into other customers. When the food came, they complained about everything. Too cold, too hot, not enough salt, too much salt. The other customers started leaving. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly, presenting them with a check they'd never settle. But I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We haven't finished our meal. You've finished. Please go. The leader leaned back, arms spread across the booth. Make us. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She was alone. Her one part-time waitress had called in sick, and the cook was 70 years old with a bad hip. She had no security, no backup, no way to. The diner door opened. Stone walked in, followed by 3 other men in Lost Souls cuts. They didn't say anything, didn't even look at the troublemakers. They just filed in, one by one, and took up positions at different tables. One by the window, one by the door, one at the counter. Stone took table 4. The young men in the booth suddenly looked very small and very young. The leader's bravado evaporated like steam. Actually, he said, standing up too quickly, we were just leaving. Keep the change. He threw a 20 on the table for a $40 check and practically ran for the door. His friends scrambled after him. The diner fell quiet. Elena stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. She looked at Stone, who had already opened his book, like nothing unusual had occurred. The other bikers ordered coffee and pie, settled in like they'd been planning to stop by anyway. She brought Stone his usual coffee, hands trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered. He glanced up, gave a single nod, and went back to reading. The bikers stayed for 3 hours. When they finally left, they left generous tips and a strange sense of security in their wake. That night, Elena noticed the motorcycle parked across the street from the diner. Different bike, different rider, but the Lost Souls patch was unmistakable. At midnight, that rider left and another one arrived. They were watching, protecting. She didn't know how Stone had arranged it. Didn't know what she'd done to deserve this kind of loyalty from a man who barely spoke to her. But for the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. No more bricks. No more harassment. Just the quiet rumble of a Harley engine, standing guard in the darkness. 23 days until the bank seized the diner. Elena had the number memorized now, counted down like a death row inmate marking days until execution. She'd tried everything. Small business loans, denied. Crowdfunding, raised $800. Selling her mother's jewelry, $1,200. She'd called every favor, every distant relative, every customer who'd ever said, if you need anything. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The call came at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Ms. Ross? This is Gerald Hampton from First National Bank. Elena's stomach dropped. She stepped away from the grill, into the relative privacy of the storage room. Yes, I'm calling about your commercial loan account ending in 4782. I'm afraid there's been a development. Development. That word never meant anything good. What kind of development? Due to an internal review of high-risk accounts, we're exercising our right to call in your loan immediately. The full amount, $48,312, is now due within 48 hours. Elena's vision blurred. What? No, I have 3 weeks. Had 3 weeks. The terms of your loan agreement include a clause allowing the bank to accelerate repayment if we determine the account poses an unacceptable risk. Given recent market conditions and your financial situation, we've made that determination. This is because of Carter Vance. She was surprised by how steady her voice sounded, considering her entire world was collapsing. He put you up to this. Hampton's pause was answer enough. Mr. Vance is a valued client with several significant accounts at our institution. But I assure you, this decision was made purely on financial merit. You have 48 hours, Ms. Ross. I'm sorry. He didn't sound sorry. The phone went dead. Elena stood in the storage room, surrounded by industrial-sized cans of tomatoes and sacks of flour, and felt the last ember of hope gutter out. 48 hours. 2 days to come up with money she didn't have, couldn't borrow, couldn't steal. It was over. She made it through the lunch rush on autopilot, smiling and serving and pretending her entire world wasn't ending. The regulars noticed something was wrong. She could see it in their concerned glances, but no one asked, and she was grateful for that small mercy. At 3 p.m., the afternoon lull hit. The diner emptied except for old Joe reading his paper and Stone at table 4. Elena started her closing routine early. wiping down counters that were already clean, reorganizing menus. Anything to keep moving, because if she stopped, if she let herself think. The first sob caught her by surprise. She was behind the counter, staring at the coffee pot, and suddenly she couldn't breathe. The tears came in a hot, shameful rush, and she pressed her apron to her face, trying to muffle the sounds. 28 years of memories in this place. Her father teaching her to flip pancakes when she was 6. Her first job, her first heartbreak, her first everything. The regulars who'd become family. The late-night conversations over pie. The way the morning light hit the windows just right, turning everything golden. Gone. All of it gone. She heard the heavy footfall of boots, the scrape of a stool being pulled out on her side of the counter. A presence, solid and warm, settled beside her. How much? Elena looked up through blurred vision. Stone was sitting at the counter, on the employee side, like he'd done it 100 times before. His gray eyes were gentle, but there was steel underneath. What? To save the diner. How much do you need? She laughed, the sound brittle and broken. $48,000. In 48 hours. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. So unless you've got that kind of money lying around. Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then, let me make some calls. Stone. Elena shook her head. You're a good man. The best. But this isn't something, you can't fix this. Nobody can. Let me try. There was something in his voice, some undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. For just a moment, she had the strange sense that she was looking at an iceberg, that the quiet biker in the worn leather cut was just the tip of something much larger, much deeper. But then the moment passed, and he was just Stone again. Good, kind Stone who barely had enough money to tip 20% on coffee and pie. I appreciate it, she said softly. I really do. But some problems are too big, even for the lost souls. Stone stood, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He laid it on the counter. I'll see what I can do. He walked out, the door chiming softly behind him. Elena picked up the $5 and felt the tears start again. Because that was Stone's last $5, she was sure of it. And he'd just spent it on coffee, trying to make her feel better. She closed the diner early that day. At home, she poured herself a glass of the cheap whiskey her father used to drink and sat by the window, watching the street below. A lost soul's bike was parked across the way, the rider a patient shadow. Still watching. Still protecting. Protecting what? She thought. In 2 days, there'd be nothing left to protect. She raised the glass in a silent salute to her father's memory, to the diner that would soon be rubble, to all the dreams that died in places like this. Then she drank and waited for dawn. Stone didn't go back to the trailer park where Elena thought he lived. He rode his 1968 Harley Shovelhead, a bike he'd rebuilt from scrap metal and genuine love, through the city streets as the sun set behind the skyscrapers. Past the homeless encampment under the freeway. Past the gentrified district where artisan coffee shops were replacing pawn shops. Past the industrial zone where warehouses rotted beside new tech campuses. He rode until he reached the private airfield on the city's eastern edge. The security guard waved him through without question. They knew him here, though they knew him by a different name. He parked the Harley next to a row of Teslas and BMWs, the motorcycle looking like a relic from another century. Which, in a way, it was. The Gulfstream G650 sat on the tarmac like a sleeping predator, all sleek lines and barely contained power. $65 million worth of aircraft, though Stone had paid considerably less by buying it in cash from a tech CEO's messy divorce. He climbed the stairs, still wearing his oil-stained jeans and worn leather cut. The flight attendant, Marcus, ex-Marine, impeccable discretion, didn't even blink. Evening, sir. We're fueled and ready. San Francisco? Not tonight. Just fire up the cabin. I need to make some calls. Marcus nodded and disappeared into the cockpit. Stone settled into one of the cream leather seats and pulled out his phone, not the beat-up flip phone he carried at the diner, but the encrypted smartphone he used for business. He dialed a number from memory. Sterling. The voice on the other end was crisp, efficient. Catherine Winters, his CFO for the past 15 years. I wasn't expecting to hear from you until next quarter. Catherine, I need you to do something for me. Of course. What do we need? This was why Stone had kept Catherine on when he'd restructured Sterling Dynamics 5 years ago. No questions about why he was calling at 7 p.m. No judgment about his requests. Just professional competence wrapped in absolute loyalty. First National Bank. I want to know who owns it, who sits on the board, and what their exposure is. I need this in the next hour. A pause. First National. That's the regional bank, correct? Mid-tier commercial lending. That's the one. May I ask why? They're foreclosing on a property I have an interest in. I want to know if we can apply pressure. Understood. I'll have a full report within the hour. Anything else? Stone leaned back, watching the city lights begin to twinkle through the aircraft window. Yes. Pull together 48,000 in cash. Unmarked bills, nothing larger than hundreds. Have it ready by morning. Done. Sir, if I may. 48,000 is a rounding error in your monthly cash flow. Why the concern about this particular property? Stone thought about Elena's tears, about the way she tried so hard to hide them, about a diner that still smelled like honest work and didn't give a damn how much money you had in your wallet. Because sometimes the small things matter most. He could hear Catherine smile through the phone. I'll have everything ready by 7 a.m. Thank you, Catherine. He ended the call and sat in the quiet luxury of the aircraft, surrounded by the trappings of a fortune he'd spent 8 months pretending didn't exist. The leather seats that cost more than most people's cars. The burled walnut trim. The fully stocked bar with bottles of scotch that cost $500 a pour. All of it suddenly felt hollow. Stone had built Sterling Dynamics from nothing. A single defense contract for armored vehicle components that he'd turned into a military and heavy machinery empire. 40 years of grinding work, cutthroat negotiations, and strategic brilliance that had made him a fortune so vast he'd stopped counting after the first billion. And then, 5 years ago, he'd woken up in a penthouse that felt like a prison and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a conversation that wasn't about money. Couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him and seen Jackson Sterling, not a bank account with a pulse. So he'd walked away, set up an ironclad trust to run the company, bought the Harley, found the Lost Souls MC, a group of ex-military and retired cops who rode for the love of riding, not for territory or profit. Rented a trailer in a neighborhood where nobody cared about his past. For 8 months, he'd been just Stone. A man who drank cheap coffee and read paperback thrillers and tipped in crumpled singles. For 8 months, he'd been happy. Now Carter Vance and his bank were threatening the one place where Stone felt human, and that was a mistake the young developer would come to regret. The phone buzzed. A message from Catherine with an attached file. Stone opened it, scanning the details. First National Bank. Owned by Vanguard Capital Holdings. Board of directors included several local investors, and, interesting, Carter Vance himself as a minority stakeholder. The bank's biggest commercial creditor, Sterling Capital Management, the investment arm of Sterling Dynamics. Stone smiled. A real smile this time, not the tight-lipped expression he'd given Carter at the diner. This smile had teeth. He made 3 more calls. First to his attorney. Draft an offer to purchase First National Bank through a shell company. I want it done by tomorrow, and I want the current board to have no idea who's buying until after the papers are signed. Second to his head of corporate acquisitions. There's a property developer named Carter Vance. Find out what he owns, who he owes, and where he's vulnerable. I want a full profile by morning. Third to his head of security, a former Delta operator named Rodriguez. I need you to look into some harassment at a diner on 5th and Madison. Brick through a window, intimidation tactics. Find out who ordered it, and make sure they understand it stops. Now, by the time he finished, Marcus had returned with a glass of 20-year Pappy Van Winkle, Stone's preferred bourbon, though he hadn't tasted it in months. Thought you might need this, sir. Stone accepted the glass, but didn't drink. Instead, he stood and walked to the aircraft's door, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably still crying, thinking her world was ending. She had no idea it was just beginning. Marcus, Stone said quietly, get the bike ready. I'm heading back. Not staying the night, sir? No. Got a booth to sit in tomorrow. Coffee to drink. He turned back, and there was something fierce in his gray eyes, and a predator to put in his place. 24 hours until the bank seized the diner. Elena opened at 6 a.m. like always, though she wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe. Or denial. Or just the muscle memory of 30 years spent in this building that refused to let her quit, even when quitting was the only logical choice. The breakfast crowd was thin. Word had gotten around. Small towns were like that, secrets bleeding through the walls. and people didn't want to be there when the hammer fell. She didn't blame them. Stone didn't show up for breakfast. Didn't show for lunch either. For some reason, that hurt more than it should have. At 3 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled up outside. Elena's heart sank when she recognized the driver. Carter Vance stepped out wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly revenue. But he wasn't alone. Behind him came a parade of expensive cars disgorging expensive people. Women in cocktail dresses at 3 in the afternoon, men in designer suits. Everyone dripping with the casual arrogance of people who'd never been told no in their lives. Carter walked in first, spreading his arms like a conquering general. Elena, good news. I've decided to host a small celebration here tonight. Call it a going-away party for the old neighborhood. His smile was vulpine. We've rented out the whole place. 6 p.m. to midnight. You'll serve, of course. Consider it your last shift. You can't just. I can actually. I called ahead. Made a reservation for 30 people. You wouldn't turn away that much business on your last day, would you? He pulled out his phone, made a show of checking something. According to the health code, you're required to serve any paying customer who. Fine. Elena's voice was flat. 6 p.m. But you pay up front. Of course. Carter pulled out a money clip and peeled off several hundreds. Let's say, 2,000 for food and service. Keep the change. Consider it a severance package. He laid the money on the counter and turned to his entourage. Come on, everyone. Let's grab drinks at a real establishment and come back when this place has been properly prepared. They left in a cloud of expensive perfume and cruel laughter. Elena stared at the money on the counter. $2,000. 2 days ago, it would have felt like a fortune. Now it was just salt in the wound. She called her part-time cook and waitress, but neither could come in. Some excuse about family emergencies that sounded suspiciously rehearsed. So it would be just her, serving Carter Vance and his friends in her father's diner while they celebrated its destruction. The irony was almost poetic. At 5:30 p.m., she started setting up, pushed the smaller tables together to create one long banquet arrangement down the center of the diner. Set out her best plates, chipped, mismatched, but clean. Brewed fresh coffee. Baked the pies her father had taught her to make. At 5:55, the door opened. Stone walked in. Elena felt something in her chest unclench. He was here. Whatever was about to happen, at least she wouldn't face it alone. Stone, you don't have to. Table 4 available. He was already walking to his usual spot. Actually, no. Carter Vance rented out the whole place for some kind of party. You should probably. Stone sat down anyway. I'll just have coffee. Won't bother anyone. Before Elena could argue, the door opened again, and Carter swept in with his entourage of 30 of the most insufferable people Elena had ever seen. They filled the diner like an occupying army, loud and brash, and utterly convinced of their own importance. Carter spotted Stone immediately. His eyes lit up with something ugly and gleeful. Oh, perfect. The entertainment's already here. He turned to his friends. Everyone, I want you to meet the local color. This is, actually, I never got your name. What do they call you, tough guy? Stone looked up from his menu. Stone. Stone. Of course it is. Well, Stone, tonight we're celebrating the future. This dump is being demolished, and in its place, we're building Vance Heights, luxury condos starting at $2 million. He gestured grandly. Progress, Stone. It's a beautiful thing. Stone nodded slowly. Sounds expensive. Very. But that's what happens when you have vision. And capital. 2 things this neighborhood has always lacked. Carter slid into the booth directly across from Stone's table, his back to table 4 in a calculated display of dominance. But don't worry. I'm sure they'll build a nice shelter somewhere for you and your biker friends. Someplace with free coffee. The table erupted in laughter. Elena brought out the first course, appetizers she'd thrown together from whatever was in the kitchen. As she served, she had to endure Carter's running commentary. Elena, darling, this is quaint. Really, like dinner theater, but sadder. Is this organic? No. How delightfully proletarian. Everyone, raise your glasses. To gentrification. They toasted with the cheap wine they'd brought themselves, too good to drink anything Elena's diner could provide. Stone sat at table 4, silent as a headstone, sipping his coffee. Watching. The party went on. And on. Carter's friends got louder, drunker, more obnoxious. They started a betting pool on how many days it would take to demolish the building. They took selfies with the vintage decor, hashtagging it hashtag slumming and hashtag real America. Elena served and smiled, and died a little more with each passing minute. At 9 p.m., Carter stood up, glass in hand, clearly preparing for a speech. Friends, colleagues, fellow visionaries. He swayed slightly. He'd been drinking steadily for hours. Tonight marks the end of an era. This diner, this relic, this monument to mediocrity, it all ends tomorrow. And I have to say, it's been educational. Seeing how the other half lives. The people who settle for enough. Who don't strive, don't achieve, don't. He noticed Stone again. And something in his drunken, cruel brain decided it was time for one final humiliation. Carter Vance walked toward table 4 with the unsteady confidence of a man who'd had just enough wine to think he was invincible. His entourage followed, phones already out, sensing blood in the water. Stone didn't look up. He was reading his book, a different one now, some historical biography, and seemed utterly unconcerned by the approaching storm. You know what I love about this place? Carter said, addressing the room but staring at Stone. It's so authentic. Real working-class people. Blue collar. Salt of the earth. He put a hand on Stone's table, leaning in. Take our friend here. Look at him. This is a man who knows what it means to struggle. To scrape by. To make every dollar count. Stone turned a page. I bet you've never had a really expensive meal, have you, Stone? Never been to a Michelin star restaurant. Never had wine that costs more than your motorcycle. Carter's voice was getting louder, performing for his audience. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Not everyone can afford the finer things in life. One of his friends giggled. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God," in delighted horror. So here's what I'm going to do. Carter pulled out his money clip, peeled off a $100 bill, and tossed it on Stone's table. Tonight, this meal is on me. All of it. Your coffee, your pie, whatever. Consider it charity. Rich man helping poor man. It's what civilized people do. The table of partygoers was silent now, watching, waiting to see what would happen. Stone finally looked up from his book. His gray eyes met Carter's, and there was something in that gaze, something old and patient and utterly implacable, that made Carter take an involuntary step back. I'm good, Stone said quietly. Oh, come on. Don't be proud. Pride doesn't pay bills. Carter was trying to recover, but there was an edge of nervousness in his voice now. Take the money. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe a new shirt. That one smells like motor oil and desperation. His friends laughed, the sound sharp and mean. Elena had appeared from the kitchen, her face pale. Carter, that's enough. Enough? I'm being generous. Look at this guy. He's clearly. Get away from him. Elena's voice was shaking, but there was steel underneath. Now, Carter spun on her, and all pretense of friendliness evaporated. Or what? You'll throw me out? This is my restaurant, Elena. As of tomorrow at noon, every stick of furniture, every plate, every pathetic memory in this place belongs to me, including you, until your shift ends. This isn't your restaurant yet. Might as well be. He gestured around the diner. Look at this place. Your father built it with his bare hands. How touching. Too bad he built a failure. Too bad he died, leaving you with nothing but debt and delusions. Elena flinched like she'd been slapped. And this, Carter pointed at Stone. This is what you're defending? A homeless biker who probably can't even afford the coffee he's drinking? You're going down with the ship, Elena, and you're going to take every loser in this neighborhood down with you. He turned back to Stone, emboldened by Elena's pain. You know what? Forget the 100. I'm buying your whole meal tonight. I'm buying everyone's meal. Hell, I'm buying out this entire diner just so I can watch you people eat my charity. He pulled out more bills, tossing them on Stone's table like confetti. There, $500. Should cover everyone here. Eat up, Stone. Enjoy your last meal in this dump. And when you leave tonight, remember, you exist because people like me allow it. This neighborhood, this building, this whole sad little world only survives because we let it. The diner was absolutely silent. Carter's friends had stopped laughing. Even drunk, even cruel, they could sense something shifting in the air, some fundamental change in pressure like the moment before a lightning strike. Stone carefully marked his page in the book, set it down, stood up. He was 6'3" of scarred knuckles and quiet fury, and when he rose to his full height, Carter actually stumbled backward. That's a generous offer, Stone said. His voice was conversational, almost friendly. Buying everyone's meal. I appreciate that. Carter's smile returned, uncertain. Well, good. I'm glad you, but I think I'll buy dinner tonight. Stone pulled out his phone, not the beat-up flip phone Carter expected, but a sleek smartphone that caught the fluorescent light. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. Matter of fact, I'll buy everyone's meal, including yours. He walked to the counter, where Elena's ancient card reader sat next to the cash register. He pulled something from his wallet, a black card, titanium, with a weight that suggested it was worth more than anything Carter had ever touched. He swiped it. The machine beeped. Processed. Beeped again. Elena stared at the screen. Her face went white. What? She whispered. Stone, this says. It's right, Stone said calmly. I just paid for everyone's meal tonight. I also paid off the diner's mortgage. And the back taxes. And he turned to look at Carter, and his smile was the smile of a shark. I bought First National Bank. Finalized the paperwork about 3 hours ago. The silence in the diner was absolute. Carter's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning horror. You what? First National Bank. The one that holds your construction loans. Your development financing. Your personal line of credit. Stone walked slowly back toward Carter, and with each step, Carter retreated. See, here's the thing about being rich, Carter. Really rich. The kind of rich where you don't need to tell everyone how rich you are. He gestured around the diner with one scarred hand. I bought this building 8 months ago. Set up a shell company. Purchased it from the previous owner. Let Elena keep running it because she loved it and it deserved to survive. I've been covering the losses, paying the property taxes, keeping it afloat. Because some things matter more than profit margins. Carter was backing up now, his face the color of old ash. You're lying. You're some biker trash who? Jackson Sterling. Stone's voice cut through the protest like a knife. Founder and CEO of Sterling Dynamics. Net worth. He paused, as if trying to remember a number too large to matter. Well, Forbes says 4.2 billion, but they always lowball it. He pulled out a business card, real, embossed, with gold lettering, and handed it to Carter. Your loans through First National? Called. Effective immediately. Your development permits for this block? I bought the land out from under you this afternoon. Your investors? Stone's smile widened. I made them better offers. They took them. Carter's phone started buzzing. Then his friends' phones. A cascade of notifications, messages, alerts. Stone turned to address the whole room. But here's what I'm really going to do. I'm going to let this diner stand. Right here, in the middle of all your luxury condos and artisan coffee shops. A monument to the fact that some things, community, loyalty, honest work, can't be bought, won't be demolished, and will outlast every one of you parasites. He walked back to Elena, who was still staring at the payment screen, tears running down her face. The building's yours, he said quietly. Free and clear. No strings. I'll have the paperwork sent over tomorrow. Then he looked at Carter one last time. Now get out of my restaurant. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Carter Vance stood in the center of Ross's diner, his face cycling through expressions too quickly to track: disbelief, rage, fear, calculation. Around him, his friends clutched their phones, reading messages that were clearly delivering very bad news. You're bluffing, Carter finally said, but his voice cracked on the last word. This is some kind of, you can't just buy a bank. That takes months, regulatory approval, you can't. Stone pulled out his phone again, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward Carter. It showed an email from the Federal Reserve, time-stamped 4 hours ago, approving the emergency acquisition of First National Bank by Sterling Capital Holdings. I can when I own the regulating body's largest creditor, Stone said pleasantly. Turns out, having friends in high places is useful. Who knew? Carter's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and whatever he saw there made him go pale. He answered, turning away slightly. What? No, you can't call the loan. We have an agreement. His voice was rising, desperate. I don't care what your new owner says. We have a contract. He listened for a moment. Then the phone slipped from his fingers and clattered on the linoleum floor. They called it, he whispered. All of it. The construction loans, the development line. He looked at Stone with something like awe. You destroyed me. In one afternoon, you destroyed everything I built. No, Stone said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it happening. One of Carter's friends, a woman in a dress that probably cost $5,000, stood up shakily. I think we should go. The exodus was swift and silent. Carter's entourage filed out like mourners leaving a funeral, their earlier laughter and mockery replaced by the grim awareness that they'd just witnessed the execution of one of their own. Carter was the last to leave. At the door, he turned back. Who are you? He asked. Not angry anymore. Just bewildered. Why were you here? In this place? Pretending to be. I wasn't pretending, Stone said. This is who I am. The other stuff, the money, the companies, the board meetings, that's the pretend part. I came here to remember what it feels like to be human. To sit in a place where people see you, not your bank account. He looked at Elena, who was still standing behind the counter, tears running down her face. I came here to find something real. And I did. Carter opened his mouth, closed it, then walked out into the night. Through the window, Elena watched his Lamborghini pull away from the curb, driving too fast, escaping from the wreckage of his own hubris. Then it was just Elena and Stone in the silent diner. You? Elena couldn't finish the sentence. Her hands were shaking. You bought the building? 8 months ago. Yeah. You've been paying the mortgage? The taxes? Yeah. You're Jackson Sterling. The Jackson Sterling. Sterling Dynamics. The defense contractor. That's me. Elena's laugh was half-sob. And you've been sitting in my diner, drinking $4 coffee, tipping with crumpled singles. For 8 months. Best coffee in the city, Stone said with a small smile. You let me cry to you about not being able to afford the mortgage on a building you owned. You needed someone to listen, not someone to fix it. He took a step toward her. Elena, I wasn't lying when I said I came here to find something real. I was tired of people seeing the money. Tired of every conversation being a transaction. Here, you gave me coffee because I was a customer. You were kind because that's who you are. Not because you wanted something from me. I don't understand. Elena wiped her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have treated me the same if you knew? Would you have sat with me that night when I told you about my brother dying? Would you have given me free pie on my birthday when you thought I couldn't afford to buy it myself? Elena remembered that day. Stone had mentioned it was his birthday in passing, and she'd brought him a slice of cherry pie with a candle. He'd looked at it for a long moment, then quietly said, "Thank you," in a voice that suggested no one had remembered his birthday in years. God, she'd given a billionaire free pie because she thought he was broke. She started laughing. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all, the relief, the sheer impossibility of the situation crashed over her and came out as laughter that bordered on hysteria. I gave you free pie? I felt bad that you were counting pennies for coffee. Oh God. She doubled over, laughing and crying at the same time. You're Jackson Sterling, and I tried to slip you extra portions because I thought you weren't eating enough. Stone's smile widened. The meatloaf was really good. Stop it. But she was smiling now too. Just stop. The laughter faded slowly, leaving them in silence again. A comfortable silence this time. The kind that exists between people who've sat across from each other through 8 months of afternoons, building something neither of them had names for. The building's really mine? Elena asked quietly. Free and clear. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork tomorrow. No strings, no conditions. It's yours. I can't accept that. It's too much. Elena. Stone's voice was gentle but firm. Your father built this place. Put his whole heart into it. It deserves to survive. And so do you. Fresh tears started, but these were different. These were the tears that came when the weight you'd been carrying for so long was suddenly, miraculously, lifted. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for the coffee, Stone said. Best 8 months of my life. They stood there in the empty diner, two people who'd found exactly what they needed in the last place either of them expected. Outside, the rumble of motorcycle engines announced the arrival of the lost souls. Stone's phone buzzed. A message from Rodriguez confirming that Carter's hired thugs had been discouraged from any future harassment. I should probably. Stone gestured toward the door. Don't. Elena surprised herself with the word. Don't go yet. Could you stay? Just for a little while. Stone nodded and walked back to table 4. Elena poured 2 cups of coffee and joined him, sliding into the booth across from him. The first time she'd ever sat there as anything other than a waitress. So she said, Jackson Sterling. Stone, he corrected. Please. Jackson Sterling is the guy in the suit who attends board meetings and makes impossible decisions. Stone is the guy who drinks coffee here. Stone, she agreed. Tell me something true. Not billionaire true. Just true. He thought for a moment, then, I was terrified you'd find out. Every day for 8 months, I was terrified you'd Google me, or someone would recognize me, and it would all be over. The coffee, the conversations, the way you looked at me like I was just a man. I was terrified of losing that. You won't, Elena said. Because you are just a man. A man who happens to have. How much money did you say? I didn't. Forbes says 4.2 billion. Elena choked on her coffee. Billion. With a B. It's not as much as it sounds like. It really is. Stone laughed. A real laugh. Deep and genuine. And Elena realized she'd never heard him really laugh before. They talked through the night. About his life before the diner. About her father. About the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. The coffee pot was refilled 3 times. The sky lightened from black to navy to the soft gray of pre-dawn. At 6 a.m., Elena stood to start the morning prep. I should probably. Stone started. You should probably help, Elena finished. The breakfast rush starts in 30 minutes, and I'm down a waitress. Stone raised an eyebrow. You want me to serve coffee? Why not? You've been drinking it here long enough. Might as well learn how to make it. So Jackson Sterling, billionaire CEO, defense contractor, ghost in his own empire, spent the morning learning how to work the ancient coffee maker while Elena taught him the difference between over easy and sunny side up. The regulars started filtering in for breakfast and did double takes at the sight of the big biker in a stained apron pouring coffee. Old Joe was the first to comment. Stone, you get a new job? Volunteer work, Stone said, refilling Joe's cup with only minimal spillage. Pays about the same as your old one, I bet, Joe said with a wink. If only he knew. By noon, word had spread through the neighborhood, not about Stone's real identity, but about the fact that the diner was saved, that Elena wouldn't be losing her father's legacy. People stopped by to congratulate her, to order celebration pie, to confirm that yes, the diner would still be here tomorrow. Stone watched it all from behind the counter. This community he'd quietly protected rallying around the woman who'd protected him right back. And he thought, this is what the money was for. Not the jets or the mansions or the power. This moment, this place, these people, this was worth every penny. The full scope of Carter Vance's destruction became clear over the next 72 hours. Stone didn't have to do much. Momentum, once started, was hard to stop. The bank loans being called triggered a cascade effect. Carter's investors, spooked by the sudden change in financing, pulled out of pending deals. His construction projects ground to a halt. The luxury condo development that was supposed to replace Ross's diner and the surrounding neighborhood collapsed like a house of cards. But Stone wasn't done. He'd spent 40 years in business learning a fundamental truth. People like Carter Vance never changed unless they lost everything. Not just money. Everything. So he made some calls. To the City Planning Commission, where he knew several members from various charity boards. Suggested they take a closer look at Carter's permit applications. Turned out, several had been pushed through with incomplete environmental reviews. Projects shut down pending investigation. To the State Licensing Board. Brought their attention to some creative accounting in Carter's previous developments. Nothing illegal, exactly, but enough to warrant a full audit. Carter's accountants quit rather than face the scrutiny. To several high-profile clients Carter had been courting. Mentioned, casually, that Sterling Dynamics was launching its own real estate development arm and would be very interested in discussing opportunities. The clients switched allegiances overnight. Elena found out about it 3 days later when Stone was refilling salt shakers during the lunch lull. Did you do this? She held up her phone, showing a news article. Local developer faces bankruptcy amid loan scandal. Stone glanced at it. Did I do what? Stone. She gave him a look. Did you destroy Carter Vance's entire business? I called some loans. The rest was market forces. Market forces named Jackson Sterling. He set down the salt shaker. He threw a brick through your window. Sent thugs to harass your customers. Humiliated you in your own restaurant. And he was going to do the same thing to the next person and the next, because nobody ever stopped him. Stone's voice was quiet but hard. I just made sure he couldn't do it again. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then, good. Stone looked surprised. Good. He was a bully. Bullies need to learn. She paused. Though maybe total financial destruction was a bit much, he'll land on his feet. His family has money. He'll just have to work for someone else for a change, take orders instead of giving them. Might teach him some humility. Might teach him to hate you. Stone shrugged. I've had worse enemies. What Stone didn't tell Elena was that he'd also made one more call. This one to a former Marine colonel who ran a construction company specializing in hiring veterans. Mentioned that a certain Carter Vance might be looking for work soon, and that despite his many flaws, the kid had genuine talent for project management. Give him the hardest job you've got, Stone had said. Something that'll break him down and build him back up right. If he makes it 6 months, call me. The colonel had laughed. You trying to save his soul, Jackson? Trying to give him a chance to find one. Because Stone remembered what it was like to have everything and feel empty. Remembered the hollow victory of crushing an opponent completely. He'd become rich by destroying competitors, and it had taken him decades to realize that winning at any cost meant losing the parts of yourself that mattered. Carter Vance was an arrogant punk who'd hurt people Stone cared about. But he was also a 25-year-old kid who'd never learned that money wasn't a substitute for character. Maybe he'd learn. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, he wouldn't be hurting Elena again. That evening, after the dinner rush, Elena was closing out the register when the door chimed. She looked up, expecting a late customer, and froze. Carter Vance stood in the doorway. He looked smaller somehow, still wearing expensive clothes, but they hung differently now, like a costume that didn't quite fit. His face was gaunt, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. Stone materialized from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, every muscle tensed. It's okay, Elena said quietly. Then, to Carter, we're closed. I know. Carter's voice was hoarse. I wanted to apologize. The silence stretched. I was cruel, Carter continued. To you, to your customers, to everyone, really. I thought I was better than people like you. Smarter, more deserving. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I was just lucky, and I confused luck with talent. Elena crossed her arms. Why are you here, Carter? Because in the last 3 days, I lost everything. My business, my investors, my reputation. My father won't even take my calls. He looked at Stone. You could have just bought the building. You could have just protected Elena. But you went further. You made sure I'd never forget what I did here. Yes, Stone said simply. Why didn't you just destroy me completely? You could have. You obviously have the resources. Because that's not the point. The point is learning. Carter nodded slowly. I have a job interview tomorrow. Construction foreman in Pittsburgh. Grunt work. Manual labor. He swallowed hard. It's humiliating. It's honest, Stone corrected. There's no shame in honest work. That's what the hiring manager said. Some Marine colonel. He told me you recommended me. Carter looked bewildered. Why would you do that? Because everyone deserves a second chance. But only if they're willing to work for it. Carter stood there for a long moment, processing. Then he turned to Elena. I'm sorry. For all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. He turned to leave. Carter, Elena called out. He stopped. The pie's not bad here. If you're ever in town again, and you want to remember what being human feels like. She paused. Table's open. Carter's eyes glistened. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and walked out into the night. Stone moved to stand beside Elena. They watched through the window as Carter got into a beat-up Honda Civic, the Lamborghini apparently already repossessed, and drove away. You think he'll make it? Elena asked. I think he'll try. That's all anyone can do. She leaned against Stone's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. Outside, the city lights sparkled like fallen stars, and Ross's diner stood solid and permanent, a monument to the idea that some things mattered more than money. Thank you, Elena said. For all of this. For the building, for protecting the neighborhood, for being you. Thank you for the coffee, Stone replied. And for seeing me when I needed to be seen. They stood like that for a while, two people who'd found each other in a diner that refused to die, in a neighborhood that refused to surrender, in a world that still, sometimes, when you were lucky, rewarded kindness over cruelty. The lost souls started arriving around 9 p.m. Elena had seen them before, Stone's brothers in the motorcycle club, the men who'd protected her diner without being asked. But tonight was different. Tonight, they weren't just passing through. They were here for a gathering. 15 Harleys lined up outside Ross's diner like a steel wall. The The riders filed in one by one, each nodding respectfully to Stone before taking seats at the booths and counter. There was Rodriguez, the former Delta operator who ran Sterling's security. Marcus, who Elena now knew was Stone's personal pilot. Others whose names she was just learning. Bear, Tiny, Ghost, Prophet. All of them wearing Lost Souls cuts. All of them looking at Stone with a respect that went beyond club hierarchy. Brothers, Stone said, standing at the head of the largest table. Elena knows now. About Sterling, about all of it. Rodriguez grinned. Took you long enough, boss. We've been running a betting pool on when you'd come clean. Who won? Stone asked. Ghost. He said you'd never tell her voluntarily, that something would force your hand. Rodriguez pulled out his wallet and handed Ghost a 20. Bastard knows you too well. Elena looked between them, bewildered. You all knew? This whole time? Ma'am, Marcus said with a slight southern drawl. We've been riding with Jackson for 5 years. Not the CEO version. The real him. The man who'd give you his last dollar and the shirt off his back if you needed it. The man who rebuilt my bike when I couldn't afford a mechanic, Bear added. He was built like his name suggested, 6'5" and 300 pounds of pure muscle. Didn't know who he was then. Just knew he was good people. Found out by accident, Prophet said. He was the oldest of the group, maybe 60, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Saw him on the news about some defense contract. Nearly fell off my bike. But by then, didn't matter. Stone's Stone, whether he's got money or not. Elena felt tears prickling again. Seemed like all she did lately was cry, but these were good tears. So this whole club is real, Stone said firmly. No PR stunt. No rich guy playing dress up. These men are my brothers. The only family that's mattered in a long time. Rodriguez leaned back in his booth. You should have seen him when he first showed up at the clubhouse. Riding that piece of shit shovelhead he'd bought off Craigslist for $3 grand. Thing barely ran. We thought he was some weekend warrior trying to look tough. Then he took apart the engine and rebuilt it in 6 hours, Ghost said. With tools he borrowed from my garage. Did it better than most professional mechanics could do it. That's when we knew, Marcus added. This wasn't some rich guy's midlife crisis. This was a man who knew his way around a wrench. Who'd worked with his hands. Who belonged. Stone looked embarrassed by the praise. You guys helped me remember who I was before the money. Before the empire. When I was just a kid in Detroit, helping my dad fix cars in our garage. Your dad would have been proud, Prophet said quietly, of the man you became. Not the billionaire. The man who stops to help a stranger with a broken-down bike. Who buys coffee for a waitress who's having a bad day. Who sits in a diner for 8 months because it reminds you of what matters. Elena wiped her eyes. How long have you all been protecting this place? Since Stone asked, Rodriguez said. About 6 months ago. He didn't explain why. Just said there was a place that mattered, and people who might need watching over. That's all we needed to know. We've been rotating shifts, Bear added. Making sure nobody messed with you or your customers. Stopped a few situations from escalating. Including those punks Carter sent. What happened to them? Elena asked. Rodriguez's smile was wolfish. We had a conversation about respect. And choices. And consequences. They chose to find employment elsewhere. Nobody got hurt, Stone added quickly, seeing Elena's expression. Just encouraged to reconsider their career paths. Ghost laughed. Rodriguez is real persuasive when he wants to be. They ordered food, massive amounts of it, enough to clear out half Elena's kitchen, and filled the diner with laughter and stories. They told Elena about Stone's life in the club, the time he'd ridden through a thunderstorm to help Marcus fix a flooded basement. The charity runs they'd organized for veterans' hospitals. The kid in the neighborhood whose bike Stone had repaired, only to find out later the kid's father had died and Stone had unknowingly given him back his dad's favorite hobby. That's why we ride with him, Prophet said. Not because he's rich. Because he's real. And real is hard to find these days. As the night wore on and the stories continued, Elena began to understand something fundamental. Stone hadn't been hiding from his wealth. He'd been searching for something his wealth couldn't buy, genuine connection. People who saw him, not his bank account. A place where his value came from his character, not his credit score. And he'd found it here, in her diner, with these men, with her. Around midnight, the lost souls started heading out, engines rumbling to life one by one. Each man stopped to hug Stone, to thank Elena for the food, to promise they'd be back. Finally, It was just Elena and Stone again. So, Elena said, sitting across from him at table 4. Jackson Sterling, CEO, billionaire, biker. Just Stone, he said. The other stuff is what I do. This is who I am. And who are you, Stone? He thought about it. Looking around the diner, at the cracked vinyl booths his hands had helped Elena repair, at the coffee maker he'd learned to operate, at the place that had become more home than any mansion he owned. I'm a guy who drinks coffee, he said finally. Who rides a motorcycle? Who found something real in a world full of fake? Who found? He trailed off, looking at her. Found what? Elena prompted. You, Stone said simply. I found you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with 8 months of unspoken feelings, of coffee and pie and quiet afternoons, of a billionaire and a waitress who'd seen each other when nobody else was looking. Elena reached across the table and took his hand, scarred, grease-stained, real. I'm glad you did, she said. Outside, the city slept. Inside Ross's diner, something new was beginning. Something that had nothing to do with money or power or revenge. Something simple and true and worth more than all the empires in the world. Something like love. 6 months later, Ross's diner looked different now, but in subtle ways. The broken window had been replaced with impact-resistant glass. The cracked floors had been repaired, not renovated, repaired, keeping the original checkered pattern Elena's father had laid 40 years ago. The kitchen had new equipment, but the old grill remained, because some things were sacred. The sign outside was new too. Ross's Diner, EST 1985, under new management, but still serving the same good coffee. Elena had insisted on the last part. The neighborhood had changed too. Where Carter Vance had planned luxury condos, there was now a community center funded by an anonymous donation from Sterling Dynamics. The old warehouse down the block had become affordable artist lofts. The vacant lot was a playground where the Martinez kids and their friends played every afternoon. Stone had been careful about it, using shell companies, working through intermediaries, making sure it never looked like gentrification. Just a neighborhood getting the resources it had always deserved. The diner itself had become something of a legend. Word had spread about the billionaire who'd sat at table 4 for 8 months, drinking coffee and reading paperbacks while everyone assumed he was broke. The story had hit social media, gone viral in the way stories about radical kindness and hidden identity always did. Tourists sometimes stopped by, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jackson Sterling slumming it in his leather cut. They were usually disappointed. Stone was traveling more now, attending to the business he'd neglected for months, though he tried to make it back most weekends. But the regulars didn't care about the story. They cared that Elena was still here, that the coffee was still good, that the pie was still made fresh every morning. On this particular Saturday afternoon in November, the diner was packed. Old Joe and his veteran buddies played cards by the window. The Martinez family occupied their usual corner booth. The construction crew from the new community center grabbed a quick lunch before heading back to work. And at table 4, Stone sat reading a book. Elena refilled his coffee without being asked, same as she'd done 1,000 times before. Busy today, Stone observed. New recipe for the pumpkin pie. Everyone wants to try it. Your dad's recipe? His, with a few modifications. She smiled. He'd approve. Stone marked his page and looked up at her. Really looked, the way he had that very first day 8 months ago, seeing past the uniform and the tired smile to the woman underneath. She looked different now too. Still worked hard, still took care of everyone. But there was a lightness to her that hadn't been there before. The weight of possible loss had lifted, replaced by the solid foundation of security. You want to take a break? Stone asked. Go for a ride. Elena glanced around the diner. Her part-time waitress, a college student named Maria who was working her way through nursing school, was handling the floor beautifully. The lunch rush was winding down. Yeah, she said. I'd like that. She hung up her apron, grabbed her leather jacket. A gift from Stone, though he'd presented it as something he'd found at a thrift shop, and followed him outside. The shovelhead sat in its usual spot, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Stone had rebuilt it completely over the past 6 months, and now it purred like a contented cat. Elena climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He was still the same man, scarred knuckles, faded leather cut, gray eyes that saw too much and said too little. But she knew him now, really knew him. The billionaire and the biker, the CEO and the mechanic, The man who'd bought a bank to protect a diner, and the man who'd spent 8 months drinking coffee just to feel human. All of it was Stone. All of it was real. They rode through the city, past the steel and glass towers where Stone's empire operated on autopilot, past the gentrified districts and the struggling neighborhoods, past all the invisible lines that divided rich from poor, powerful from powerless. They rode until they reached the overlook above the city, where you could see everything, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the broken. Stone killed the engine. In the sudden silence, Elena could hear the wind, the distant hum of traffic, the beating of her own heart. I got an offer yesterday, Stone said. A developer in California wants to replicate what we did here. Community-focused development, preserving existing businesses, affordable housing. That's good, right? It is. But it means traveling, being away more. He turned to look at her. I wanted to make sure you were okay with that. Elena smiled. Stone, I knew who you were when I said yes to that first ride. You're not just the guy at table 4. You're Jackson Sterling. You have responsibilities, companies, people who depend on you. You depend on me too. No, she corrected gently. I choose you. There's a difference. He kissed her then, soft and unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her head on his shoulder, looking out over the city. Tell me something, she said. That first day you came into the diner. What made you stay? Stone was quiet for a moment, thinking back. You smiled at me, he said finally. Not because you wanted something. Not because you knew who I was. Just because that's who you are. Someone who smiles at tired strangers. And I thought. He paused. I thought, here's someone real. Someone who sees people, not opportunities. I wanted to be in that world for a while. Just a while. I was thinking 8 months, maybe a year. He turned to her, and his smile was soft. Turns out, I want to stay forever. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, still crying, still feeling too much, still utterly unable to believe this was her life now. Forever sounds good, she whispered. They stayed on the overlook until the sun started to set, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Then they rode back to the diner, where the dinner crowd was just starting to arrive. Stone took his usual spot at table 4. Elena took her usual spot behind the counter. The coffee pot percolated its familiar rhythm. The old grill sizzled with burgers and bacon. Everything was exactly as it had been 8 months ago, and everything was completely different. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't about rags to riches or revenge served cold. Sometimes, they're about a man who had everything learning that the only thing that mattered was sitting in a cracked vinyl booth, drinking bad coffee, and being seen by someone who cared. Sometimes, they're about a woman who almost lost everything discovering that the scruffy biker at table 4 had been guarding her dreams all along. Sometimes, they're about a diner that refused to die, a neighborhood that refused to surrender, and 2 people who found each other in the space between who they were and who they wanted to be. Stone looked up from his book and caught Elena's eye across the diner. She was laughing at something old Joe had said, her face lit with genuine joy, and Stone thought, this. Right here. This is everything. The money, the power, the empire, all of it was just noise. This was the signal. This was home.